It is the spring of 1944, and the most powerful military intelligence operation in history is handing Adolf Hitler a gift. The gift is the truth. The Allies are coming. They are massing men, tanks, ships, and aircraft on the southern coast of England in numbers that have never existed before in the history of warfare. Hitler knows this. His generals know this. Every senior officer in the German High Command knows an invasion is coming across the English Channel. The question is not if, the question is where. And the answer, the real answer, is something the German military almost figured out correctly and then chose to ignore because of one man's ego and one of the most audacious deception campaigns ever conceived by human minds. You have probably heard of D-Day, June 6, 1944, Normandy, the largest seaborne invasion in history. But what the textbooks usually skip over is the part that makes your jaw drop. The part where the Allies essentially told the Germans exactly what they were planning, buried it inside a mountain of lies, and watched the most efficient military machine in Europe destroy itself trying to figure out which pieces were real. This is not a story about bravery on the beaches, though there was plenty of that. This is a story about information, about deception, about the extraordinary lengths human beings will go to when they know the entire fate of a war depends on a single morning. By 1943, the Allied leadership had a problem. They were going to invade France. Everyone knew it. The Germans knew it. The newspapers knew it. The question was how to make the Germans look in the wrong direction when the boats finally came. Roger Hesketh, a British intelligence officer who would later write one of the most detailed accounts of what happened, described the situation in precise terms. The Germans had every reason to expect an attack across the narrowest point of the English Channel, the Pas de Calais, where the water is just 21 miles wide, where the supply lines would be shortest, where the port infrastructure was strongest. And they were not wrong to think this. It was the obvious choice. Any military planner with a map and a ruler would have circled Pas de Calais first. So the Allies decided to make the obvious choice feel even more obvious, and then land somewhere else entirely. The operation was called Bodyguard. The specific component targeting the Pas de Calais deception was called Fortitude South, and at its center was a ghost army. Imagine an entire military force. The first United States Army group, commanded by the most feared American general the Germans had ever studied, General George S. Patton. That did not exist. No soldiers, no tanks, no artillery. Just a fiction built from fake radio transmissions. Inflatable rubber tanks positioned where German reconnaissance aircraft would photograph them. Carefully planted stories in newspapers, and a network of double agents who fed a steady stream of false intelligence directly into Hitler's hands. The Germans were not stupid. Their signals intelligence was sophisticated. Their aerial reconnaissance was thorough. But the Allies had something the Germans did not fully understand they possessed: complete and total control over German intelligence inside Britain. This is where the story gets almost impossible to believe. In the years before D-Day, German military intelligence had sent dozens of spies into Britain. Every single one of them was either captured, turned, or was already working for British intelligence before they arrived. Every single one. Historians John C. Masterman and Roger Hesketh, who had access to the full records after the war, documented what became known as the double-cross system, a coordinated effort by MI5 to run every German spy in Britain as a double agent, feeding back false intelligence to Berlin with such consistency and precision that the Germans believed they had a functioning spy network, when in fact they had nothing but a room full of British intelligence officers typing messages. The most important of these double agents was a man the Germans knew as Garbo. His real name was Juan Pujol Garcia, a Spanish chicken farmer with no formal intelligence training who had approached British intelligence with an idea so audacious they initially turned him away. He would invent a network of fictional sub-agents across Britain, send fake intelligence reports to Germany, and in doing so build a reputation for reliability so complete that when the critical moment came, Berlin would trust him over everything else. They trusted him completely. By the spring of 1944, Garbo had invented 27 fictional agents, each with their own identity, their own assignment, their own carefully constructed history. The Germans were paying him to run an intelligence network that existed only in his imagination and the files of MI5. And they believed every word. Now add to this one crucial advantage the Allies held that they could not reveal even after the war for decades. They were reading the German military's most secret communications in real time. The Enigma machine. The German military had convinced itself that its encryption was unbreakable. The mathematicians and code breakers at Bletchley Park in England, including Alan Turing, whose work in this period essentially invented the architecture of modern computing, had broken it. The Allies knew what the Germans knew. They knew which deceptions were working and which were not. They could adjust in real time. This gave the planners of Operation Fortitude South something no military deception operation in history had ever possessed: immediate feedback on whether the enemy believed the lie, and the Germans believed it. By May 1944, German intelligence assessments concluded with confidence that the main Allied invasion force was the fictional 1st United States Army Group, positioned across from Pas de Calais, under Patton's command. Normandy was considered a possibility, a secondary feint perhaps, or a probing attack. But the main blow, they were certain, would come at Pas de Calais. 15 German divisions were held north of the Seine River, waiting for the attack that would never come. Then June 6th arrived. When the Allied forces hit the beaches of Normandy, Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword, the Germans' first instinct was not to reinforce. It was to wait. Surely this was the feint. Surely Patton was still coming with the real force. Hitler himself, who had gone to bed the night before and left strict orders not to be woken, did not authorize the release of the Panzer Reserve divisions until the afternoon, hours after the landings had begun. And then Garbo struck his masterstroke. At 3 in the morning on June 6th, as the invasion was already underway, Garbo sent an urgent message to his German handlers. He had intelligence, critical intelligence. He needed to speak to a senior officer immediately. By the time contact was established and his message transmitted, it was too late for the Germans to act. The landings were already happening. But the message itself, and the follow-up report Garbo sent days later, accomplished something even more important than warning. It convinced German high command that Normandy was the feint. Garbo's fictional intelligence network, his 27 invented agents, his years of cultivated trust, told the Germans exactly what they wanted to believe. The real attack was still coming. At Pas de Calais, hold the reserves, don't commit. Wait. They waited. For 7 weeks after D-Day, the Wehrmacht held back critical armored reserves north of the Seine, waiting for the main attack that was never going to come, while Allied forces broke out of the Normandy beachhead and began the liberation of France. Historian Roger Hesketh later estimated that Operation Fortitude South contributed more to the success of D-Day than any single military operation on the ground. Not the paratroopers dropped behind the lines, not the naval bombardment, not the air cover. The lie. The carefully constructed, meticulously maintained, spectacularly successful lie. Hitler knew the Allies were coming. His generals knew where they were landing as the ships crossed the channel. The information was there. The truth was available. And it was used against them. Buried under so many layers of false intelligence, so many phantom armies and invented agents and intercepted signals, that the most critical military decision of the 20th century was made not on the beaches of Normandy, but in the minds of men who had been deceived so completely they didn't know it until the war was already over. You live in an age where information is everywhere. Every fact, every data point, every truth and lie coexist in the same feed, the same search result, the same confident voice telling you it knows what is real. The lesson of D-Day is not about soldiers and beaches. It is about something far stranger. The most dangerous thing about information is not that it can be hidden. It is that it can be given to you in full, true and false together, and you will choose the version that confirms what you already believed. The Germans knew the Allies were coming. They just refused to believe where.